We have covered understanding calamity in general, and we have looked at understanding the present specifically. Now we move on to look at understanding nations and their actions. And actually, the scriptures speak very clearly and increasingly about the effect of Satan and evil spirits on nations, and specifically on some of the world leaders. And this happened very clearly during Daniel's time, Isaiah's time, Ezekiel's time, and then the book of Revelation speaks of it very clearly um, in many different ways. And again, like so many points, we do not have the time to go into details to show this, but there's a clear teaching, declaration of the scriptures that there's an invisible war going on. Satan is controlling nations. He controls political systems. He is behind false religions. He even works between churches and plans lies and deceptions all the time. But as we look at nations, especially, there's this continual state of affairs of nations throughout history, all the way to the end times, from the beginning of the history of nations, all the way to the end, where that many of the leaders, many of the actions of nations are energized by Satan and his assistants and his whoever works with him, evil spirits and so on. So our problem is not in the first place political or economical. It's really in the first place something of a much more difficult order. It really calls us to pray, to seek God for solutions. No one can control this. Nobody can stop this. It's a very powerful effect on how state of affairs. Now, the thing of it is, the more we study prophecy, the more we study end times, the more we understand today. It's much like a physician, a trained physician can look at a wound and see so much more than somebody who's not a physician. Likewise, someone who studied prophecy and end times can come back and look at today and events today and nations today with much more wisdom and depth, can see things that others may not be able to see. And there's so much more about this. So we need to heed this. Another thing we need to understand is the nature of evil, its origin, and so forth. And so many people misunderstand this. So many think that good and evil will stay together all the way to the end of times. That's not true. That's not the way it was before. Actually, evil is not a thing to be created. As Augustine tells us, as he understood the scriptures, he said that evil is a privation of good, is the absence of good. And actually, God created man originally with freedom of choice to choose to follow him who is ultimate good or not. And by giving him that choice, he honored man. He honored his humanity. He gave him dignity to do so. But man chose not to follow this ultimate good, God, and therefore there was evil. Good is created by God. Good is God himself. Good is like light. Light enters, darkness runs away, goes away, disappears, and not the reverse, and so on. Now, the question is, God knowing man, why would he create man, knowing that man would make the wrong choice? And the answer to this very quickly, without enough time to show you, that the only reason God created man, the only reason that he created man, knowing that man would make the wrong choice, is that he was determined to suffer for us. He was determined to experience pain, to come himself to the world of man and take upon himself the sin of man, to redeem him from that wrong choice and bring him back eventually into a world where sin and evil does not exist at all forever and ever. And that's why Christ is seen as, and his blood and his cross as as having been done before the foundation of the world. And that's why. And so what this says is that evil is temporary. It's temporary. It's passing away. This is our hope. Okay. And that leads us to the next point. And that is, and actually, we're still under the big subject of, as we experience calamity like the coronavirus, is this a sign of the end times? The next point is we need to understand the rapture. The Lord spoke of two events in the future very clear. One is his second coming, his return to the earth. He comes with a host of millions of angels in great glory. He comes down at the Mount of Olives and he judges between nations, and he comes victorious as a judge to the earth. Unlike his entry into Jerusalem when he was on earth here, he was meek, riding on a donkey. His second coming, his return to earth would be in such magnificence and glory. That's his second, his return to the earth. But then the Lord speaks of another event. He promises something entirely different, and the Bible calls that the rapture. It's where the Lord comes down and in heaven, he raptures the believers up to him. And the dead in Christ actually go before that as they receive their glorified bodies, and believers alive would be clothed with with new glorified bodies and are with the Lord. That's what he says, I'm coming to take you to where I am. That's called the rapture. That's a sudden appearance of God in Christ where he takes the church up to be with him. Now, so there's the description of the two events are very different. His return to earth, he comes in judgment, in great glory to judge the nations. He comes before the whole world. That's one thing. But in the rapture, it's secretive. He comes to take the believers, his people, up to be with him. There's no talk about judgment then. It's a message of hope, of joy. It's something to give us comfort, to look forward to. So there are two different events. Now, the thing of it is that we need to remember is that the rapture is sudden. It comes at any moment. We don't know when. There are no signs that must take place so that the rapture comes. There's no sign. But however, the return of Christ to earth comes after all the signs have been fulfilled, have happened. All the signs must be completed and done. And then people, believers in the tribulation will begin to say, okay, now he can come any moment. Well, in the present, we're here today, we may see signs resembling events in the end times, but the rapture comes so suddenly so that not all signs must necessarily be fulfilled. He comes suddenly, whether the signs are fulfilled or not. But his return to earth, all the signs, all the events, all the prophesied events that would take place must take place before he returns. So we're at this point. We're before the rapture. We are waiting for that time when he would come for us, and we don't know when that would be. Okay? So we need to keep those in mind, and that's a comfort. That's a promise by his grace to his people. Not that we will not go through tribulations today, we'll go through trials of all kinds, but that there would come a time when we don't know when, that he will take us to be in heaven when we would be relieved of all suffering. There'll be no death, no pain, no sin, none of that in heaven. So that's our hope. Now, if we have to remember that we are not right now. We are not in the tribulation. The events of the tribulation have not begun. Actually, had they begun, there'll be so many things must take place for the tribulation to be in action. I mentioned earlier about one of them being the apostasy, where people would rebel directly against God and refuse any word from him, and they would follow Satan and so forth. But then there would be the appearance of the Antichrist, who would be such a deceptive, attractive person to go against God directly. There'll be what Paul talks about, the mystery of lawlessness. There's this mystery of lawlessness happen where people there's this sin secretly growing and brewing and getting stronger and stronger, and it's a hidden thing, but there's the restrainer restraining it. But it's happening right now. When it says the mystery of lawlessness, when it says mystery, it's something that's not known a lot about or not known at all, but it's actually real. This is happening right now. But someday, if we were in a tribulation, this will be complete. This will completely show itself in all kinds of ways. And again, the restrainer is still restraining. We're still not in the tribulation. We still have not entered that time of when we would count down, where people who come to faith even would start to see, okay, now we're really entering. We see all these things happening. We're really in the tribulation, and we can count down to the Lord's coming. We're not there yet. The Lord is still restraining sin. All right, He's still, Antichrist has not appeared. The apostasy has not taken place. We're still in that situation where the rapture has not taken place, and so on. So we need to distinguish between the rapture and the second coming, and that would lead us to the final point in our next segment.